crashing foul over geographical inaccuracies. China's aviation authority last Friday called the attention of Delta Airlines after it listed Taiwan and Tibet as independent countries in its website. Delta promptly issued a public apology, admitting it had made a grave mistake. The American airline said it recognized the seriousness of the mistake and had taken immediate steps to resolve it. Authorities asked other foreign airlines to check their websites for similar inaccuracies. But Delta was not alone in making such a mistake. The internet regulator in Shanghai ordered international fashion brand Zara and medical equipment maker Medtronic to update their websites after they too were found to have referred to Taiwan as a country. The two companies complied with the request and also issued public apologies in their Chinese websites. Earlier, Chinese authorities shut down Marriott International's domestic website, which listed Chinese territories Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau as countries. Marriott's Chinese site shows a message with an apology saying the company never supports any separatist organizations that seek to undermine China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Chinese authorities ordered foreign firms to immediately fix the mistakes and warned it will take legal steps to resolve the problem if they fail to do so. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also had this to say.
We welcome foreign investment, and the foreign companies here must respect China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, abide by China's laws and regulations, and respect Chinese people's national sentiments. This is also the basic respect to the country that any foreign company that invests here must show.
These website mistakes have triggered an uproar in China. People are wondering whether businesses made a simple mistake or there's more than meets the eye.
Are some foreign companies indeed running full of China's sovereignty? Really? That is the case? Let's loop in our panelists to discuss that. In Beijing, we have Liu Baocheng, the Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome, sir. And also joining us in Beijing, Edward Lehman, the Managing Director of Lehman Lee and Xu Law Firm. Welcome. Also in Beijing, joining us from another studio, Zhong Ho Tao, researcher in the Taiwan Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome as well. Mr. Zhong, let me begin with the two of you here in the studio with me. So, Professor, what do you make of the recent debates about whether foreign companies are intentionally or not trying to violate China's sovereignty, given the recent event as mentioned in the background?
I think, yes, there is a rising national pride among the Chinese netizens, but this pride is not really completely matched by the knowledge of many of those multinational companies who are freshly entering into China or handle a natural extension of their information system without adapting to this environment. And it also is a reflection of the blunder made by some of the firms like Marriott and Delta, that they do not have the right of do's and don'ts orientation for management to come to China. And also, I think the Chinese government has also the responsibility to educate more of those, and they can even hire NGOs or third-party services to educate more of the multinationals to comply with the Chinese standard.
Is it about awareness? Is it about the know-how? Is it about, you know, just a simple determination to violate China's sovereignty?
Well, you know, I think about the famous journalist H.L. Mencken. He said no one ever went wrong underestimating the intelligence of the average American. So a couple of those companies, Delta Airlines, Marriott Hotelier, both American companies, and quite frankly, I mean, they probably were just plain stupid. I mean, and I would imagine that they're backtracking. Somebody who deals with businesses like I do, I know there's a disconnect between the IT people who are putting the websites together and the corporation per se. As
Devils are really always in the details. It's true.
Devils in the details,
or God,
or whatever you want to say.
How to raise the awareness that the multinational companies will be able to understand the political sensitivity of this country or any other country they are going to operate, and also making sure it's going to be sustainable. It's not just going to be like political campaigns.
Sure. I think that education is one thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been teaching a course, Doing Business with China, in the
You're
United
not
States.
going to do advertisement for your course
You know,
here.
in the United States, that's my job.
Right, go ahead.
You know, teaching many of those foreign executives who are prepared to come to China. So the first is don'ts and don'ts.
Yeah.
So when you come to a country, actually this also applies to to Chinese companies and Chinese individuals who visit or invest in overseas.
That's a great point, because what we are seeing today, it's a global business landscape. Wherever we travel, there are political sensitivities in that culture, in that country, in that history. But as a foreign investor, how can you educate yourself and make sure you have enough awareness to go ahead and try to educate yourself? It's a big question mark, particularly when you have very competitive environment for your business at any moment.
Sure. The professor and I were talking about this before the show began, and we were saying,
Without me participating? Is that what you're saying?
We were trying to get you involved. It was very difficult. But no, but one of it is, I can understand Hong Kong, I can understand Taiwan, perhaps making a mistake, but Tibet, I mean, I think that this is beyond the imagination. There's not that many Delta Airlines flights in there. There's not that many Marriott Airlines. You know, so I don't know where that happened and how that happened. And in your course, I don't think you need to tell them Tibet is part of China. I think there is some confusion because the airlines are going together, the hotels and whatnot are together. And I'm trying to explain to clients that's the common law jurisdiction, not a civil law jurisdiction. And people still are confused as to what Hong Kong is and Macau and different places.
One of the things we need to deal with old habits, because there has been a lack of awareness, just a matter of fact, about these issues. For example, Taiwan is part of China, and Hong Kong is part of China, and also Macau is part of China. Tibet, of course, is part of China. So when you do not have the old habits right, it is very difficult and challenging to make sure that the new awareness could rise. But that is the landscape that we are dealing with. I mean, we're dealing with an international business landscape. That's what multinationals need to learn. And that also leads to what Professor Liu just talked about, which is Chinese companies going global.
Right.
Also face similar issues about cultural, political sensitivities and awareness.
That's right. I think.
Are we ready?
Yeah, actually, when I was coaching one company, and as how to make a difference, how to write correctly, you know, DPRK versus ROK, and right now with the split of Sudan, South Sudan, etc. And so this is something that we need to be prepared. As a matter of fact, in some of our training programs for foreign government officials, we mentioned the 3 Ts, you know, the Tibet, Tiananmen, and Taiwan issue, so that you could pay attention to. And also for Chinese executives who get prepared to go overseas, they also receive some of the orientation, I should say. You know, we need to do far more better homework. You know, many Chinese companies are in a rush, simply that they go and try, and in certain of the documents and which are not really spelling the right name of the business leader or the
It sounds like a
government
cliche,
official.
but it's actually not. Because when incidents happen like
does.
this, it's not going to be pleasant.
No.
So companies better learn before mistakes are being made. Having said that, though, let's go to Mr. Zhong, because Mr. Zhong, we invite him as a scholar on the issue of Taiwan. Let him explain to our viewers internationally why this thing is so sensitive politically to China, why the Chinese care so much about the issue of Taiwan, the issue of Hong Kong, the issue of Tibet. Mr. Zhong, probably you can help us to understand better.
Yes, of course. Since Taiwan, just as you said, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Tibet, and other areas are China, inseparable part of China. So it is quite related to our national key interest, and it is quite related to our people's national pride and the national feeling. So if somebody take Tibet or Taiwan or Hong Kong as a foreign country, then it would hurt our national interest. It will hurt our people's national feeling. So that is the political sensitivity of Taiwan issue, of Hong Kong issue, or Tibet issue.
Right.
So
and the Taiwan issue particularly, which is your expertise, Mr. Zhong, recently
Yes.
has experienced some quite ups and downs, shall we say, over the past 1 year or so since a new administration came to power in Taiwan. There was the party struggles among the political parties in Taiwan, and those that are closer to the mainland are likely to be further punished and suspected against. And there's also the recent Congress decision in the United States, at least in the Senate, about the Taiwan certain kinds of specific legislations, which is still in the process. That's why it seems that this side of the world, particularly here in China, things related to it can become very sensitive. Mr. Zhong, help us understand better.
And for cross-strait relations in the past year, the official dialogue has been suspended just because Taiwan authority refused to 1992 consensus. But the people-to-people contact, I mean the unofficial communication has been increasing. For the example, in the past year, the cross-strait economic ties has been increasing by about 14%. So from this, you could find that the cross-strait people-to-people contact has been warming, although the official dialogue has been cooling. As for the Taiwan Travel Act in United States, I think it is hurting our people's feeling, and it is damaging the One China policy, which is written in 3 Sino and U.S. joint communiques.
All right.
So I think the United States should restrain itself and respect our national interest.
Absolutely. Mr. Zhong, while you were talking, I was trying to note down some of the terminologies. For example, 1992 consensus. For those who have not studied this side of the politics well, they probably wouldn't know. And also the 3 joint communiques between China and the United States. How much is it talking about Taiwan? To what extent? About what content is it relating to Taiwan? Probably for those who are not in the field may not know necessarily. And also the people-to-people relations you specifically talk about without giving specific examples. What I'm trying to say is that when we have cross-cultural communications, we all need to be very aware, including myself, about what has been said clearly and what are being taken granted, whether that is correct or not. So in this case, when these companies, Mr. Zhong has already advised carefully, when these companies are aware of their mistakes, they should correct it. If they don't, that is a mistake of a very totally different nature, right?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I mean, everyone wants their sovereign borders recognized. And this is the whole thing with Mr. Trump right now. I mean, he's saying, let's enforce the laws, let's talk about our country. And the same thing is
I'm not
true
sure
of
that
China.
should be compared to what is going on here in China about this case.
It's not dissimilar. I mean, in as much as saying, one must follow what is the law of the land of the People's Republic of China, which is saying that this is an inseparable part. That's Taiwan, that Macau and Hong Kong are inseparable. So that's...
Here comes the thing. It is not just the issue about whether people respect the sovereignty of China. It has also become an issue when it's being portrayed internationally about China's relations with multinationals these days. We have heard different versions of stories about what China's attitude toward foreign investors these days compared to maybe 20 years ago, and the other way around, how international investors as a result interact with China, and then how Chinese are looking at these attitudes coming from international investors and react even more. So this seems to be a cycle that we're talking about here. The question is, how can we see the common ground of both sides? Let's just say international investors and also China's own economic and trade development. Professor, probably you have a say here because you're teaching these courses every day.
Yeah, it's, we always say it's a better engagement of all stakeholders, either it's the government or business partners and consumers together. So China has always been very much resolved and actually consistent to welcome global companies in China. And right now, particularly during the past 15 years, after China joined the WTO, we are trying to create a better leveling field where we can converge the tax system, the all type of treatment that is similar to the Chinese companies. So of course.
So let me ask you directly, since
yes.
that is a question being asked in, let's just say, international media stories. They say, does China still need international investors?
Absolutely.
Is China going to welcome international investors as much as it did before?
Absolutely. I think China is not offering the, say, supranational treatment, which is true, but China is creating a better infrastructure and better environment for global companies, and the entire going abroad process actually is able to better combine with investing in China, the inflow and outflow, so that really can really serve the Chinese double strategy. In global integrities.
Mr. Zhong, I want to go to you as well. As you may have noticed, the Chinese consumers these days are made of ever younger generations. They are the main labor force when it comes to consumption. They grew up in a very different environment, usually after the reform and opening up. What they see is China always on the rise. And also what they see is the foreign businesses are doing extremely well and harvesting in China. How do you see the reality now, and how should we make sure both the foreign investors, international investors, as well as China's own constituencies, understand the history and also understand the important common grounds both sides really have with one another?
Yes, as for Chinese consumers, especially for those young consumers, they fully understand that those foreign investments has directly helped or boosted Chinese economy. So they highly appreciate those efforts from those foreign companies. Still, for those young generations, they become much more pride or become much more aware of the national interest, I think, than the other generations. So I think they should ask those foreign companies to be much more aware of the China national interest. They should respect China national interest, should abide Chinese mainland's laws and regulations, and should also do some self-check or self-examination on the Taiwan issue, or Hong Kong issue, or something like that. So I mean, in one word, I think for China, especially for those young generation, they welcome those investment from other foreign countries because they would provide more job opportunities for. But still, those foreign companies should abide by Chinese regulations and laws.
And before we go, Mr. Lehman, you want to have final words?
Yeah, I do. You know, I mean, the question is, what is an international company any longer? So, like Foshan, for example, owns Cirque du Soleil. I mean, by way of example, I mean, Alibaba is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. JD.com is as well.
Okay. So, what is your point?
My point is that it's a constantly moving target about international businesses and who owns them and who doesn't. Waldorf Astoria, bought by the Chinese. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily penalize. There is some bad actors in this. I think it's up to the government to educate people how it should be written, and then businesses can abide. And then businesses, I think, want to because they want to make money. They don't want to offend anybody.
Very interesting discussion. Well, we have to wrap it up over here. I hope those cases will not be repeatedly discussed and the same mistakes will not be made. Thank you so much, the three of you gentlemen, helping us understand better about this, quote, sensitive issue. Professor Liu Baocheng, Mr. Zhong Houtao, and Mr. Edward Lehman. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us.